This episode is supported by PIMCO, a global leader in active fixed income with deep expertise across public and private markets. PIMCO invests their clients' capital in income and credit opportunities that span the liquidity spectrum, leveraging their decades of experience navigating complex debt markets. Their flexible capital base and deep relationships with issuers have helped them become one of the world's largest providers of traditional and alternative investment solutions and a valued financing partner. Visit pimco.com to learn more.
And I think it's important, honestly, for us to not always get what we want. Because honestly, sometimes you think you may want something and it's honestly not the best fit for you. You just have to move forward with the faith that the better opportunity is going to come along and it's always a better fit.
I'm Aoife Devitt, and welcome to the 50 Faces podcast, a podcast committed to revealing the richness and diversity of the world of investment by focusing on its people and their stories. I'm joined today by Ghiané Jones, who's Deputy CIO at the Teachers Retirement System of the state of Illinois, where she is based in their Chicago office. She previously was Managing Principal at Meketa Investment Group, a role she held for over 6 years, and prior to that worked in a range of financial services roles, including in institutional ETF sales at Invesco and Northern Trust, and as a regional consultant at Goldman Sachs. Welcome, Ghiané. Thanks for joining me today.
Great. Thank you, Aoife. It's wonderful to be speaking with you today. And congrats on such a successful podcast.
Thank you. Well, yes, we're nearing 260, I think, by the time this one gets launched. So great to have your story added to that list. So let's start where we always start, which is with your background and career journey. Can you talk a little bit about that, where you were born, where you grew up, and how you entered the world of investing?
Absolutely. So I was born and raised here in Chicago, but I went to college in upstate New York. And funny enough, I expected to be working in New York City after graduating from Hamilton College. I first became interested in investing during my freshman year at Hamilton. I really didn't understand the mechanics of investing at all. I just thought it would be an interesting career path, largely because I was curious about it. Growing up, my parents always really advocated for us to become doctors and lawyers, but I wasn't particularly interested in either of those paths. Unfortunately, my sister became an attorney, so half of the equation worked out. But I was more interested in investing in finance and just managing money, how to accumulate assets and how to make them grow. And so at Hamilton College, I majored in economics. Hamilton is a liberal arts college, so economics was really the route to financial services and investing careers. And as economics majors, we were all required to have a Wall Street Journal subscription. And so I faithfully read it. I still didn't fully understand the mechanics of actually investing, though. So I started attending career sessions on campus my freshman year. So career sessions hosted by the big banks and financial services firms, because I really just wanted to learn more about Wall Street, financial services broadly, and just what it would take to at some point land a job or career opportunity in the industry. Fortunately, my sophomore year, Goldman Sachs held a competitive program that invited young women from liberal arts colleges across the Northeast to apply to attend an on-site. It was like a Women's Day at the Goldman Sachs offices in New York City for rising juniors and seniors from liberal arts colleges across the Northeast. And back then, Goldman Sachs had 85 Broad as well as a bunch of other offices scattered across downtown Manhattan. So essentially, young women from liberal arts colleges around the East Coast, like me, applied for the program. I had no real reason to think that I would be accepted into the program. I was hopeful that I would. Fortunately, I was accepted into the program. And then Goldman, of course, paid for travel to New York City for all the young women that were accepted to this event. And after attending, I was just so impressed by the people and the overview of the departments at the firm. And from there, I decided that I was going to work at an investment bank, and more specifically, if I could, Goldman Sachs. During the event, they actually told us that sophomores weren't eligible to apply for summer internships at that point. We would have to apply for the next summer. So as I prepped going into my junior year, I had my eyes set on applying for a Goldman internship. And so I kept in touch with the recruiters and just patiently waited for the opportunity to apply for an internship. the summer after my junior year. And I was very fortunate to land a super day in New York City. And then I requested Chicago. And so I had a super day in Chicago and then received my full-time offer with Goldman in Chicago. And so that's how I ended up in the industry and also back in Chicago, which was unexpected for me because I really thought I was going to go back to New York City because I had so many friends there at the time. But it's been history from there.
Wow. So very clear career intention and ambition from an early stage. Really impressive. And I suppose the question is, since you kind of knew early on that you wanted to do this, and not everyone has kind of had their eyes opened to the world of finance, did it live up to your expectations once you got there? Were there surprises or anything to reckon with once you got in the door?
You know what? Lots of surprises, lots of career diversions. I didn't know that I wanted to be necessarily within investments. I just knew I was an entrepreneurial child. I used to sell stickers from Scholastic book subscriptions. I was an avid reader. So I used to look for ways to make money from my stickers since the age of 8 because I would just get new Scholastic books every month. And so I enjoyed accumulating cash at a young age. And it kind of spurred that spirit of wanting to understand finance more. And so I really didn't have direction until I attended those career sessions my freshman year. But in terms of how things have worked out, certainly I've been pleased with how things have evolved. But going into the industry, there were lots of concerns, setbacks, diversions. I will say when I was a young 20-something, I had tunnel vision around what I expected, what I thought I was going to do. And throughout my career, I've had great mentors who really advised me to be open to opportunities. Don't be so focused and targeted in your approach where you become devastated if a certain path doesn't work out the way you expected it to. And because throughout my career, I've been open to new opportunities while also keeping my head down and focused, but also just being engaged more broadly around different ways that my career could potentially evolve. I think that's what's helped me. And so that's one of the things I always tell young professionals is sometimes you come out of school thinking that your life and your career is going to lead you down a certain path and you're going to be doing a certain job or be the head of a business or whatever by the time you're XYZ age. It's really about being flexible. Your career is a marathon, not a sprint, and being open to those opportunities. So things have certainly changed for me versus what I expected I'd be doing in my 20s.
I love that word diversion. I'm sort of thinking of road diversions. You get there eventually, maybe not the way you thought. And it can certainly be a setback when you see those signs. But moving now to your latest diversion, it's been a while now in your current role as Deputy CIO at TRS Illinois. Can you describe that role and what's at the forefront of your mind?
Yeah. So, as Deputy CIO, I manage the Chicago office and I oversee the investment department and all of the portfolios alongside, of course, Stan as well. It's been really wonderful working with Stan and all of my colleagues at TRS on the investments team. Currently, I'm leading our asset liability and asset allocation project internally and in partnership with our general consultant, as well as working with our specialty consultants, as well as all of the officers. I really enjoy and respect their feedback and comments as well as we kind of shepherd what is a Titanic type of portfolio. And, because of my prior role and experience as a general consultant at Meketa, the transition has really been seamless from my perspective. I went from supporting and advising public fund clients on a variety of investment and broader plan issues to now managing these issues internally with my team. So it's really allowed me to apply everything I've learned in my career across investments as well as broader, plan issues and the advisory aspects of that. I've been able to really transition that in-house. Funny enough, even my prior experiences in business development at some asset managers, portfolio construction, investment advice in general has all really come to fruition in terms of my ability to advise my team in this role. I've been able to bring forth a variety of institutional investing best practices across the investments portfolio, investment strategy ideas, portfolio construction ideas, reporting and monitoring ideas, and then more importantly, broader team education and different ways for us to collaborate. So it's been really a wonderful transition. I'm fortunate that we have a wonderful team, a robust governance structure, and a highly diversified portfolio to work with.
Can you just give us a little bit of paint the picture a little bit? You mentioned it is like a Titanic portfolio or a super tanker portfolio. What size is it? And when you talk about asset allocation, one of our previous guests was from CPP Investments, the Canadian pension plan, and they're speaking about a total return approach that they have. What would you say your approach to asset allocation is?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're 71 billion in assets as of May in terms of our estimated asset size. As a reminder, we're 45% funded. So when we're fully funded, that will be more like 150 billion in assets. In terms of our asset allocation approach, certainly total return is important, but given the fact that we are an underfunded public pension plan, cash flows, especially in this environment, is critically important as well. And that, that's certainly something that I work with our team to consistently monitor, especially across private markets portfolios where we've seen exit activity really decline significantly over the last couple of years. And we still obviously have commitments and pacing. And so ensuring that those portfolios are cash flow positive is something that we continue to monitor and work with all of our GPs on and our consultants from a pacing perspective as well.
Just want to pick up on something you said. Is it very interesting? You said your time in business development has been an interesting skill. That might be a surprising thing to think for an allocator. You're being sold to, you don't have to sell to anyone. But I do like that adage that I've heard before that everything is sales. And I'm sure there's somebody you're trying to make a case for, whether it's your board or other stakeholders. How did that experience in ETFs and in the business development role, how did that factor into this? And I'd love to hear your views on ETFs and using passive strategies more broadly.
So I largely was in business development roles for 10 years prior to joining Meketa, both Goldman Sachs as well as Invesco and Northern Trust. And what I think is so critically important that many people who've never been in a business development role don't understand is, just as you mentioned, you're always selling someone or presenting or communicating to someone. There are always stakeholders that you need to educate and manage around and engage on, your strategy. So if that's my fellow, investment officers and or our chief investment officer and or our board, there's communication that has to be involved with every stakeholder within our organization, our system. But then I also understand really clearly how to best practices just around engaging with our managers and really providing transparency, and also those that we do work with, partnership. We certainly want to communicate and provide feedback when a strategy is not appropriate for us and why. I don't want to waste their time and I don't want them wasting our time. And so being, a former business development professional, I understand how important it is to, sometimes when you're presenting a strategy, you just need to know, if you're going down the right path with your client or prospects, or if it's not a fit. And sometimes clients aren't always willing or prospects aren't always willing to communicate that. And so I take the very clear approach of, trying to provide that transparency when things are not appropriate for us, or if it does make sense for our team to have conversations around and do further due diligence. So having that communication and being fairly transparent, I think is important as we manage relationships with asset managers. And that's kind of one of those key skill sets that has come about because I understand being on the other side of the table. And in terms of ETFs broadly and passive strategies, really using passive strategies as a tool within our investment toolkit is critically important. I certainly wasn't as familiar with the importance of passive strategies and ETFs prior to me joining and becoming a critical part of business development in the ETF space and learning about and educating my clients and prospects around smart beta, which is really just, factor investing and allocating capital towards those compensated risk factors and doing it in an ETF vehicle. Passive strategies are certainly important and play a critical role within our portfolio when it comes to specifically our equity portfolio, domestic equity, I should say. But it's important for investors to have a full and robust understanding of all of the vehicles that are available to them when managing much more complex portfolios. Every day, all of our portfolios are growing in complexity. And so to have that broader toolkit and understand when to leverage passive strategies is critically important. So I'd say, working in the ETF and passive space really broadened my horizons as it relates to thinking about your investment toolkit and when to leverage and manage vehicles across strategies for different purposes. We certainly don't use ETFs at this point, but we use passive strategies, and they're critically important for us in the equity portfolio.
I just want to pick up on two things. We'll do two separate questions, one on the complexity you mentioned, and then the second thing is on feedback to managers, and particularly some of those who need it most. So just starting with complexity first. So alternatives, clearly quite different from passive, but very much a trend among institutional investors. How do you use alternatives, to what degree, and what role do they provide in your portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. So alternative strategies are a critical part of our portfolio. Just like most institutional investors, we have return targets and we're allocating capital in line with future expectations of returns. And so alternative strategies like private equity, private real assets, real estate and infrastructure, as well as private credit, certainly are key components of our overall asset allocation. When we look at our alternatives portfolio, we're around 30% or more in these types of strategies where we think we can really drive long-term returns for our beneficiaries. Given the need for growth, every public pension plan has reached more into private markets over time. I expect that they'll continue to be attractive sources of returns for institutional investors. And the key for us, and I'm sure other public pension plans are dealing with this too, is just optimizing the balance of liquidity in your portfolio, just to ensure that you have the capital to rebalance, of course, satisfy benefit payments and capital calls. And now more than ever, it's just been important to pay attention to cash flows coming from those alternative vehicles, especially given the decline in exits. And so that's something that we're monitoring, and we're having conversations with consultants and GPs around pacing, but also ongoing cash flows and distributions from those programs.
Well, having spent time as CIO at Chicago Police with a lower funding level, but a similar cash flow crunch, I know that those conversations well. So yes, another conversation I know well is the discussion around diverse and emerging managers. And you mentioned some of the service you kindly provide to managers, which is to be transparent and to assist them, I think, with knowing what's right for you and what isn't. But also, I know that every single word of feedback you give them will be meaningful and something they can use for their next pitch, because nobody has the time to waste, I suppose. What is your approach to diverse managers? Maybe we can just remind our listeners about the policy in Illinois around the use of those in pension funds.
Yeah, absolutely. So within Illinois, we, of course, across all the public pension plans are allocating a minimum of 25% to diverse and emerging managers. That's a core value of mine, of the organization, and fortunately of the organizations I've worked at in the past. We're highly committed to supporting emerging and diverse managers and always have been at TRS. We launched our program nearly 20 years ago. And so as investment industry professionals and allocators in particular, we just have to ensure that we're providing opportunities for diverse managers to meet with our investment teams, engage, and we should be providing the appropriate feedback when needed, and even potential client referrals when we have them. I always like to be appropriately transparent, as I mentioned, when a strategy isn't a fit for us, because their time is just as valuable. But we've maintained an open door policy to meet with and engage with emerging and diverse managers and continue to do so. In terms of, I believe, diverse talent as well, that's certainly critically important for us as we continue to enhance and bring in diverse professionals across the organization. The industry broadly has to continue to build a pipeline of diverse talent by exposing young, diverse people to the industry in high school and college. I've spoken to several high school and college programs about the industry and the different career paths they can pursue. I was once that young student that didn't have exposure to the finance or investments industry. And my first exposure to it was through career sessions at Hamilton. If I did not have those sessions to attend, I would have been lost and wouldn't have understood the myriad of paths that I could have gone within investments or in financial services more broadly. So I think that's really critical for our industry to ensure that we're reaching back to students, both at the high school and college levels, to educate them and to start building that pipeline of talent, start advising them on what the career pathing could look like as they think about their educational opportunities, what classes that they should take if they're interested in pursuing a career in investments or financial services. So I think the industry is getting better, but of course, we continue to have to do more.
Yes, I usually ask the what grade would you give it question, and you could answer that, but I think we can both agree it's not an A+.
Exactly. Completely agree.
And let's move to some reflections now. So you seem to have had quite, as I said, an intentional career. And even though there were some diversions, as you say, you've landed in a very prestigious place. Were there any setbacks or challenges there that you said, these are teachable moments, or these are lessons I'm taking away that I'm going to maybe share with some of these mentees I speak with? Anything you can share there?
I guess at every organization I've ever worked at, or within every department, I've always had some type of, specifically in my 20s, I should say, the first 10 years or so of my career, I always had a certain plan, and things changed for a variety of reasons. Either, I thought I was going to be leading XYZ department or region or whatever, and things didn't work out that way. And then after the 24 hours of feeling pity for myself, I just moved on with the faith, knowing that better things would come. And I think it's important, honestly, for us to not always get what we want. Because honestly, sometimes you think you may want something and it's honestly not the best fit for you. And what I've always used as one of those adages or, guiding lights from a career perspective is just, you just have to move forward with the faith that the better opportunity is going to come along and it's always a better fit. And so I think it's just important for young professionals to keep their heads down, execute, be a great team player, collaborate, become a student of what they're doing, but more importantly, be open to new opportunities that may be different from what you envisioned. And don't get so down and depressed when you don't get an opportunity that you thought was a great fit for you. Because guess what? That better fit opportunity is coming your way. Things always just kind of work out. And so when you operate with intention and you execute and you show up and you're a collaborator and a team player and you're learning as much as possible and enjoying what you're doing, better opportunities come along.
I love that exhortation to show off. That's one of the biggest things that makes a difference in life, I think. You mentioned mentors that you had and the guidance they gave you, not to maybe have the tunnel vision and to be open to opportunity. Any one or two names you can mention there that really had an impression on your career?
Oh, absolutely. So one was Bruce Heyman at Goldman Sachs. He was the partner and head of the Chicago office during my tenure there at Goldman. And I used to leverage his advice pretty regularly when I would especially just be trying to understand and navigate the organization and just trying to figure out how best to approach different situations. So his advice and sponsorship was certainly critically important for me there. And then at Northern Trust, I had great mentors as well. One of them was Marie DeZanis, who was wonderful in terms of providing great feedback and, also telling me to be open to possibilities and opportunities. She was one of the main ones that really passed along that advice, which has always stuck with me throughout my career. Then, of course, all of my wonderful colleagues that I work with at Meketa, even when people aren't direct mentors or sponsors, you still learn and engage with each other. And so I learned a tremendous amount throughout my tenure there and certainly had wonderful mentors there as well. So yeah, plenty throughout my career and at every organization.
Those organizations, the consulting firms, the banks, the asset managers, the large diversified ones are like really just extensions, I think, of your education, because there's such a wealth to pick up there. Well, Ghiané, it's been a pleasure to speak with you. And the one word that comes to mind in this conversation is pragmatism. I think you show how pragmatic you've been throughout your career. You had a plan. You recognize that plan doesn't always work out. I think it is the perfect mindset for public pension funds. Clearly, there is a pragmatism needed. Clearly, a funding level that you cited, 45%, is not a perfect situation, but it requires a pragmatic, flexible mind to tackle that, as well as someone who can make a case and work well with stakeholders. So I know that you, as a collaborator in chief there at TRS Illinois, will mean that the plan is in very good hands with you and your team, including Stan. So thank you so much for coming here, opening a window onto how that plan is run, and for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you. It was wonderful speaking with you today.
I'm Aoife Devitt. Thank you for listening to the 50 Faces podcast. If you liked what you heard and would like to tune in to hear more inspiring investors and their personal journeys, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as investment advice, and all views are personal and should not be attributed to the organizations and affiliations of the host or any guest.